All right, welcome everybody. Shane Carter here, Hampshire Capital. We have a special guest today. As always, I have Eddie Austin, our VP of Investor Relations. But today we also have Nick Bouquet, business partner, principal in Hampshire Capital. And Nick, we are going to grill you today about one of the first steps we have in underwriting and analyzing an opportunity, which is our neighborhood analysis. So let's kick it off. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, great to be here, guys. And I'm excited to talk underwriting with you guys. Certainly the majority of how I spend my time here at Hampshire. Mm-hmm. So for us, there's lots of ways to underwrite an asset. We'll get into the financial nuts and bolts probably in a different conversation, but we always start with looking at the neighborhood and submarket first. Because for us, there's a few reasons that we think that's the most important place to start. There's a few different strategies in acquiring multifamily. It can be kind of top down, which is what we do, is looking at the macro first and then the asset last, or bottom up where you look at the asset first and the macro last. For us, you can't move the property, right? And so we're ultimately, we're investing in a multifamily building, but we're ultimately buying a neighborhood in the submarket. And we're buying the dynamics of that neighborhood and submarket. So that's jobs, employment, income, home prices, location, job access, highway access, all those things. Those things are very slow moving metrics. They don't change quickly. And if you're going to own an asset for 3 to 5 years, which is our typical hold time, you want to make sure that we're buying an asset in a location that aligns with our business plan and, it's a place where we'd want to own for multiple years, where we're not trying to catch a short-term wave. Because again, these big demographic and area trends, they move quite slowly. So, and for us, the neighborhoods are in submarkets, really spending time to analyze those. And I'll step into some of the things we look at here in a minute. It really does two things. It minimizes risk because you're understanding the dynamics of your tenant base, which is ultimately your customer, which is really what we're crafting the entire acquisition thesis around. And two, it allows you to match the business plan to your customer. So it's a risk mitigation strategy, and it's also a business plan alignment strategy. You don't want to be looking to charge $2,000 in rent at a property when your tenant base earns $40,000 a year. There's a mismatch there, right?
That won't work.
Yeah. So, but we see all kinds of crazy things in this business and underwriting. So just for us, we fundamentally try to match essentially our business plan to the market and submarket. So we spend a lot of time looking at, some of the things we look at. The big things are incomes. So we typically want to see average 1 and 3 mile income at least around $50K per household median. We will buy lower than that. We'll certainly buy higher than that. But anytime we deviate from that, we want to understand the risks associated with that deviation, right? So, but as a good rule of thumb for us, 50K is a safe number. That is a kind of workforce housing type income, which is really the demographic and tenant that we're serving. And this Class B and A- workforce housing product that we're looking at. We want to see crime that's, at or below kind of the market and MSA average in our neighborhoods. We want to see decent to good schools, because a lot of this product is 2 to 3 bedroom housing, which includes a lot of children. So that's just another bonus and attraction. And we also look at job diversification. So we want to make sure that we've got a diverse workforce so that we're not highly concentrated in a particular work sector. Because again, if there's a macro shift in that particular sector, it's a risk that we like to understand, and we like to see diversification there, so we can have some stability in the tenant base and in their job employment and the income streams for the property. And I think a big underwriting step that we do that a lot of groups don't is we look at our pro forma rents and we compare them to the median area income, and we like to see that our pro forma rents are affordable, meaning which is technically kind of means if we want to see our pro forma rent being 3 times. The monthly income is 3 times the pro forma rent on average.
To add something with that right there, I've seen a lot of underwriters, they over aggressively underwrote properties here last year and the year before, that the rent growth was off the charts, way above 3% a year, way above 2.5%. They're like, we're going to receive 5 to 7%, but it's not working out too well for them.
Sure.
Yeah.
And, and it's just really, again, that's another way for us to check to make sure that we're matching the business plan where we think we can push rents to what's sort of reasonably affordable for the existing residents there, regardless of if incomes grow in that market over the next 3 to 5 years. We're saying if the rents today were X, are they affordable to the resident base at a certain ratio test that we run? And if it is, great, then we feel better about the business plan. And if not, then we might want to go back and scratch our heads a bit more about, is this the right play, or should we push rents as much as we are?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Really, yeah. So,
yeah, I love that. And you're right, man. That is something that a lot of people don't do, and that obviously is a great tool that we use. So I guess you just listed a ton of different data that you pull from. How do you get that data? Where does it come from?
Yeah, I mean, there's pretty much all the data that we use, you can essentially get for free through the Census Bureau, Bureau of Labor, and other sort of public government databases. They're just they have a lot of brain damage to work through that data. So, we use CoStar, and we use a service, Neighborhood Scout, which are paid services. Neighborhood Scout's pretty affordable. It's like $100, $150 a month, but it literally, on a micro neighborhood perspective, gives you a fantastic snapshot of all the things we just talked about, plus 20 or 30 other metrics that you might care about if you're a single family guy or a commercial developer, or just all kinds of different metrics on the micro neighborhood level. Because some of these submarkets and these big MSAs we play in, they're large, right? They're not just 1 mile walk; they're miles and miles and miles.
Yeah, and that's an important point. Is that if we can step back a little bit, the sandbox we play in are the major MSAs, million plus populations in Texas, Carolinas, and Florida. But let's just pick one. Let's say Dallas, for example. Just because you find a 250 unit, 1989 asset in Dallas, does that mean it's a good buy? Does that mean every asset in Dallas is in a good location? Is every neighborhood in Dallas good? Well, of course not, right? So we take that next step and drill into, what are those neighborhoods that we believe in, and those areas that are that have good historical data. But let's talk a little bit too about, how do we project what's coming, and how do we know what's happening in 5 years from now, and how does that play a role in our business plan, our investment thesis, or neighborhoods that we look to invest in?
Sure. So, a few things, there's not fantastic forecasting data in terms of some of the macro factors I just rattled off about these neighborhoods, but there is good population growth data. So we like to see neighborhoods where we've got population growth that's at least higher than the national average or the MSA average. And typically these neighborhoods that we're buying in these fast growing Sunbelt markets, like Shane mentioned, we're multiples of that number. So we're 5, 6, 7, 10, 20% on our Dallas deal in far north over 5 years. That's just incredible. So there's a sort of a supply side, a demand side driver that we get really excited about when we see when we're looking at all these different neighborhoods. And look, they range, to Shane's point. There's markets in Dallas with negative population growth projected.
Yeah. One thing.
It really comes down to neighborhood to neighborhood, but that's one thing we look at. And one other, and I guess the other sort of forecasting factor is we do look at construction supply too within a given neighborhood, because again, we want to have the supply demand dynamics be in a place where we've got absorption at least matching supply over that whole period of time.
Yep.
I think, going along with that is, I think a lot of people forget about looking into that sub-tertiary market, those sub-markets of Dallas, and then pay attention to the green space. I don't think many people look at the green space, and what that means is, probably the city of Dallas, they have a map up where they have a projected planning for where they see more sub-markets being built at. There's a red space that is dead. It's an old industrial area. Probably 100 years from now, they'll repurpose that space, but there's probably a green space that they want the city to move to. And I think that we target on looking for that green space of where will the future be in the next 5 to 6 years or 3 to 5 years. The market is moving in that direction, and we're buying in that location that hasn't been noticed yet.
Sure. Or path of progress type.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
we call it green space.
Yeah, and so for us, we will look at kind of the new construction multifamily trends or supply story kind of happening within 3 miles of the asset. But then we're also looking at sort of macro from Dallas, for instance, or any MSA, kind of where are the new construction developers, multifamily, where are they building, right? Because and that's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because you got to still, it tells you where the demand is, it tells you where kind of the rent, where people are certainly bullish on multifamily and rent growth, but you don't want to be located too close to that stuff because even Class A deliveries can affect B and C rents if there's too much of it, right, in a market, or if we're in a bit of an economic cycle where we are now, we're in a little bit of a recession. You'll see some of those Class A new deliveries drop their rents substantially to get occupancy up in these periods, which can then affect our product. So it is a balancing act, but it's certainly important to track the supply side story.
Yeah, and if you had a magic situation, you would have extremely high population growth, extremely low deliveries of new product, but then what I would call, tangential signs of a good submarket, which is Class A retail being developed, and plazas with Whole Foods anchors and large commercial development that's occurring, even though multifamily isn't.
Right, and that's that is another good point, Shane, is that we do look at what's happening from a retail and commercial perspective around the property too. So our Dallas deal, North Dallas deal, there's not really a whole lot of multifamily construction around the property. But boy, is there a lot of nice retail going in, right? And It's both the north and south of the asset, which, those guys have far more sophisticated demographics teams than we do. They spend millions of dollars a year, talking Target, Whole Foods, those kind of companies. They're spending millions of dollars a year on demographics. And so we piggyback off of what they're seeing, right? They're following traffic patterns, access, population growth, and demographics as well. So it's just another thing that we certainly keep an eye on. And it's one of those things where you can look at it on a map, but you really got to get on the ground and see it to really feel what's happening in those areas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think something else we pay attention to that some people make a mistake on or overlook is, so let's take Houston for a second. If you look at the internals of Houston, Houston at one time was a booming city for multifamily, but I think it's one of the most overpopulated cities for multifamily. So when it comes to rent growth and maintaining a good tenant base, you have to pay attention to all the other multifamily that you're surrounded by. If you've got one operator that had a building that he's had, I don't know, since the 80s, he developed piece by piece over the years, and he's stuck at charging $800 a month. And then we have a building right next to it that's charging $1,600 a month. We have a good product, but do you feel like we'll always have that battle with them people across the street, or are you kind of controlled by all these other multifamilies surrounding us? Is that something that you take into play?
I want to buy that building across the street, first of all.
Well, me too, yeah, because he probably don't know the value of it.
Right.
Yeah. But for me, I'm standing there at my multifamily going, oh, he needs to sell that to me because we need to turn this thing around. He's the bird maintenance off the charts. At the same time, he's controlling my rent.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, kind of coming back to demographics and submarket, to me, it kind of depends, right? If that's an $80,000 a year income area and he's got the $800 rents and we've got the nice product with $1,600 rents, I'm not worried about his $800 rents, right? Because I think there's probably enough residents that are going to be interested in what we're trying to offer. If it's a $45,000 area and he's got the $800 rents and there's 500 of them in the market and we've got the nice product, I'm going to be worried about that, or I'm going to underwrite it differently, right? I'm not going to, I'm going to assume more economic vacancy. I'm going to assume more concessions. I'm going to assume more turnover.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the biggest things that I've always spoke this exact sentence to many people because they ask the question, Eddie, what do you think about this market? What do you think about this type building? Look, you have to fall in love with location first, because you cannot change location. I don't care what kind of person you are and how powerful you are. You can't move that product. The location is the location. The next thing you have to fall in love with is the numbers. So once you've checked all your boxes on the location, fall in love with the numbers, and then you've got a good product. And I think that's where I'm proud to know that what we do as a company, we are through that 100%. You are heavy in analytics on everything you're doing with underwriting, on the actual basis of the property, paying attention to all those indicators, and then we know how to operate them.
Yep. Go ahead, Nick. Give him the phrase. What's one of our mantras here at Hampshire Capital?
We buy submarkets and neighborhoods first, assets second.
That's right. That's our mantra. We buy neighborhoods first and assets second. Yeah.
I brought that up because I knew there was one. I had to bring it out.
Yeah.
No, Shane and I, we've been saying that for 18 months now, and we still hold true to it. And look, we spend a lot of time on sort of the analytics side of neighborhoods and submarkets, and we're always looking at ways to get better at that and triage it and use more different technology. We've got some interesting things in store for 23 around creating, really sort of leveraging the next stage of technology, not just looking at the data sets, but trying to put together some kind of comparative predictive type things using the data that we have access to with some of the technology and tools out there.
I know that all three of us has looked at a property that we absolutely fell in love with. We're like, man, this is such a great product, but it's just the wrong location. And you look at it and you're like, man, this was such a great plan for a building and a setting and everything else. It's beautiful. Why wasn't it put somewhere else?
Yep.
You wish you could move it.
That's right.
Well, the land was cheap, and that's probably the only way they could build it.
Right.
Or they built in that red space. Man, I know that in the next 20 years that's going to be a good neighborhood. Instead, the town went that way.
Yeah.
And they went, crap.
Yep.
They rolled the dice, and they got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, look, we got to wrap this episode up, but really appreciate it, Nick. This has been a fantastic first episode with you to have you dive deep with us on neighborhood analytics and underwriting, and appreciate it. We'll see you on the next one.
You got it, guys. Take care.
Thank you.